design tools. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the design tools that we have in the studio, what to do with them, and which ones and the ones that are coming in 4.1. So first, a little bit about what design tools is within Untitled Studio. So what we basically do is tools that help you creating and managing your resources. So there are a ton of different resources. The most obvious ones are layouts. So we have a layout editor. You can edit your layouts, you can edit menus. And what we created is a tool where you can do drag and drop. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. We have drawables, and that includes things like colors, like PNG, effect of drawables, and everything. But there are many others. So we have fonts, we have styles and themes and animations, and like many other things. So in design tools, what we do is we try to create UIs that help you managing those resources, so you don't have to actually do all of them by doing XML. But if you choose to do XML, we also want to have you, we also talk about that. So basically, the talk has two parts. So the first one is what we have today. So it's the tools that we have today in 3.6, which is the release candidate version. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the new tools that are in 4.0, and there are a ton of them. So we'll talk about things like motion editor and motion layout, and a little bit of about Compose. And let's get started with the one we have today. So these are the ones that you can really use. They've been stable for a while, so you can play with them and so we have the layout editor, we have the navigation editor, and we have the resource manager. These are the ones that are coming. So we have the motion editor, we have a new layout inspector, we have multi-preview, custom preview, and obviously the compose tool. So we'll talk about that later. So let's start with the layout editor. So this is the layout editor. In case that you haven't used it, because one thing that we hear a lot is I like to use XML. We are aware of that. I'm trying to convince you to use the UI, but if you don't want to, that's also fine with us. It's been with us for a very long time, so I'm not sure how many of you remember this, but this is from the kids' days. Yeah, so more like this is like really old. And these are the things that the problems that we have with this layout editor. So what I do in the layout editor doesn't match what I see on my device. That's pretty common. We know about it. We're trying to get it fixed. But the other common concern is like, look, I try to do my layout using the layout editor, and it's super hard to get it to look the way that I want. So the way that my design looks and how I want it to perform. So to solve that, in 2.2, we created ConstraintLayout. And when I said we created ConstraintLayout, it's because the tool that created ConstraintLayout, like the team that created it, is the same thing that actually does the layout editor. So there are many reasons for ConstraintLayout. In my opinion, it's simpler to use, and you can get more complicated layouts done in a simpler way. But the main reason is we wanted a layout manager that actually you could use in the layout editor. So the problem with linear layout, or relative layout for the matter, is with drag and drop, like it wasn't prepared for that. So it's not easy to create a tool for that. So ConstraintLayout is something that we created to solve that problem. And this is a problem that is not specific to Android. This is a problem that is also in other platforms. So we created ConstraintLayout to basically fix that. So as I said, it's designed to work with the layout editor. You basically can drag and drop and move things around to change your constraints. It is easier to maintain, and when I say easier to maintain, it's not easier to maintain than a linear layout, obviously. Now, when you have a fairly complicated layout, using ConstraintLayout will help you to actually make changes in it. And the other important point for ConstraintLayout, it is responsive. So if you have a layout that needs to adapt to different screen sizes, which I guess like everyone has, using ConstraintLayout can get you there faster. So it's easier to put a constraint and you set a distance, and then basically it will respond to layout steps. But these are the typical problems. I don't have a UI tool. I prefer to change my XML. Fair enough. My layout preview doesn't look at all like a device. That is, as I said, that is something that we heard a lot. Or not in renders. Pretty common. So I'll also talk a little bit about that. When everything else fails, and I know that some of you actually try to avoid it, but please do report back. We look at them, and this is really important for us. So we need to know which issues are very common, and sometimes it's very hard for us to reproduce, so do report back. Another tool that we have is the navigation editor. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but basically why you should be using navigation if you are not. Well, it will simplify your application, your own navigation, right? So it helps you to basically deal with fragments. So if you have these fragments, you know that maybe it's not the best API or the easiest API. So with this, you can actually deal with that. It helps you with the dig links, and it helps you like passing parameters around. So you should use it. It works out of the box with fragments and activities. You can adapt it to use any system, any navigation system that you have. But the navigation editor will work with activities and fragments. Also for consistency. So if you don't use the navigation library, you should, because your app will be consistent. So it provides helpers for the bottom-up navigation, and it will help you to manage the app stack, which is pretty important. And this is how it looks. It's a graph editor. So basically you define entry points and a number of destinations, and you say how do you want to navigate from one to the next. So it's a fairly simple tool to use, and I think that in this case, you don't really need to change the XML. Like everything is provided here, and it's very rare that we see people that actually need to change the XML when using this tool. The last one is that we already have is the resource manager. So the first is what's the resource manager and why do we have it? And basically it was born out of the frustration of dealing with multiple resources. So if you have like a medium-sized project and you have a ton of resources, before having the resource manager, it will mean that if you want to preview one, you will need to look for it, open it, see the preview, close it, this is not the one I wanted. If you want to preview like multiple of them, forget about it, or open multiple tabs. So we created the resource manager. So it will help you explore. So if you want to see your resources, the resource manager provides a view of all your projects, and you can see them all together. You can zoom in, out, you can see the qualifiers that actually apply. You can see all like the different resources. You can see mid maps, you can see the drawables or the layouts. So you can use the resource manager to deal with that. The other thing is it helps you to explore resources that are not in your project. So if you want to explore the resources in your libraries, which sometimes might be handy if you're looking for a particular item, you can do that. If you want to explore the resources in the platform, you can also do that with resource manager. It's a very easy way to explore, which is much better than going to the project view and trying to figure out. And you cannot do that for like another feature, which I'm sure you are aware of, is importing. So the resource manager will, if you have a design team and you have a bunch of different changes or different resources you want to import, you can go to the importing tool and you can basically give the folder, and it will try its best to name the resources in the best possible way based on your folder naming, and it will also try to assign qualifiers when possible. If it cannot assign qualifiers, it will give up and it won't be a qualifier. But basically, what you will get is this: a dialog with every single resource that you are trying to import, and then you can manually change the qualifiers, you can remove the ones that you don't want to import. So it basically simplifies the process of importing things, and I think that this will make it much faster. And we are always improving this part, so we try to, so if you have X to X, we try to match that to the right density in your folders. So it's very useful. And the last thing that the resource manager can do is, well, it's a tool window, so if it's next to your code or to your layout editor, you just basically drag and drop, and you can create like image views. It works for the layout editor, but if you have code, you can also drag and it will create the image view for you. If you drag on top of an image view, it will replace the resource. So it's pretty handy when you are like dealing with changing resources. So that's pretty useful. But on to Android Studio 4.0. So in 4.0 we have a ton of features. These are just a selection of them. There are many of them. Currently you can download the Canary 6, I think. And you can already play with everything that I'm going to talk about. You can already download it and you can start testing it. So I'm going to focus on this one, which is already quite a lot. Like the URL down below, you can actually click it and it will basically lead you there. One thing I want to mention before is, so let's get started with the new things in there with your 4.0. I'm going to mention two quick things. One is the split mode, which is not exactly new in 4.0. It's something that it was already there in 3.6. But it makes a lot more sense in 4.0, and you will see why. So before you used to have to create different tabs, and we have the design and the text tab. And a lot of people told us, it's like, look, I don't want the design tool. I don't want to use it. I'm pretty happy with my XML and my preview. So the split mode comes on top of that. It's like for people that actually want to work with the code and want to have the preview next to it, it helps. And how is this helpful? Before the preview would be like a tool window, so if you click a different layout, we will change the preview. Well, now you can basically do any layout that you want. So if you want to do something like this, where you have two different layouts and you have two different previews, it's up to you to do. So with this split mode, this is a small change, but I think we think that it's very powerful in how you can actually set up your workspace if you want to work with things like, again, the code. It's very useful. Also, it's the same layout that we will use for Compose. So in Compose, because it's very code-centric, it has a similar situation, right? So you have your code, and next to it, you will have the trees. The other thing is, for the Elevator 4.0, we have a new rendering engine. And the new rendering engine is meant to solve a lot of the problems that I mentioned before, like, oh, it doesn't render, or it doesn't really look the way that it looks in my device. And I'm going to give you a few examples on things that we've seen. So the first one is this. You will be surprised how many people complain about this. I wouldn't expect it, but that's the case. So we just have a bunch of color models. And before 4.0, well, that's how it looks. Yeah, I know, it looks bad, but the biggest problem is not that it's not color emojis or anything like that. It breaks your layout because the measuring of the font is wrong. So not only you don't see actually what you have, it's like it will break the rest of your layout if you rely on the text you take in a certain style. So that's not great. Yeah. Well, in 4.0, because we have a new rendering engine, this is how it looks. So that's how it looked before. And this is how it looks in the new layout. So pretty close, I would say. It's not the same. And the reason for this is, again, the previous rendering engine was based on Java 2D. So what we will do is we'll map all your canvas codes and all the framework into Java 2D codes. And the problem is Java support for color fonts is not that great. So we have this problem. So now what we do is we use the same font rendering as Android. So the results will be pretty accurate. So let's see another example. Another text view, because text was one of the key problems. If you have a very long text and you basically say, oh, I want to justify this text in my text view. Well, this is how it looks. I wouldn't say that that's justified. So with the new version, that's how it looks, and that's how it looks in the emulator. So again, if you look word by word, it's the same for the same device, so I think that's very good here. And the last example, again, this is one might not be that common, but we also saw a lot of problems with this, is you have a car view and you apply a rotation to it because you have an animation or because you can modify something. So rotation and an elevation. Well, that's how it looked before. Not very rotated. That's how it looks now. So it's applying the transformation in our way. Again, because it's a new engine, we are doing the same thing that the platform does. And again, if you look at the emulators, that's how it looks in the emulator. So it's getting there. Multi-preview. Multi-preview is, again, related with layouts and previews. It's a new feature. It's, well, not exactly new. So we already had it in the past. So if you remember Android Studio from the early days, this is what we call multi-preview. So it's one layout in multiple devices with the nice looking frames of every device. When we moved into the new ConstraintLayout layout editor, we dropped it. And we dropped it because it wasn't that useful and it was super hard to actually maintain. So we decided to drop it. So this is how the new multi-preview looks. So we have removed the frames, but again, you can still see multiple devices. But we have added a bunch of things that actually we think that is going to happen. So if you have one layout and you want to preview in multiple devices and see if it breaks or if it looks different, this is the feature that you want to use. So things that you can do. You can, by default, preview in all the pixel devices if you're interested, at least to see different widths, different densities, and see how things look. You can see the same layout in all the languages that you have in your project. So if you have a string that actually breaks your layout, this is a super quick way to actually see it, because you will see like the pattern actually cuts the text, or it breaks, or it goes out of the layout. We also have the large font mode, so if like you go into system settings and you change the font, we know that that breaks a ton of layout, because people either didn't use SP and then we don't scale it correctly, or you use SP but you didn't account that someone can use such a large font in any font. So this will help you to do that. You can also create your custom configuration that will set it for you. So if you're working in a project and you want to save a number of devices or a number of configurations that you want to try out, you can create your own ones. But the one that I'm most excited about, and this is hopefully at the start, is the colorblind mode. So this is course that we are doing in accessibility. So we are trying to make all the applications more accessible. So this is the first thing that we have in the multi-preview, where you can see one layout with different types of color blindness. And you can see how your layout will look for someone that is actually colorblind. So if you have two buttons of different colors, It may be very obvious for you that it's red and green, but for someone else, it might not be. So this will help you to debug that and to actually see it very quickly. And we are going to be working in adding more and more things. So this is a good start. And this tool is actually very useful for seeing something in multiple layouts. Custom view preview. This is another tool or another view that we are adding. This is meant to solve what I mentioned before about like, look, nothing renders. Or I see a gray box, so my view doesn't render. Well, the problem is what the layout editor uses the preview, and the preview doesn't simulate absolutely everything in Android. So we don't simulate services. We don't let you access the network. So that kind of things are limited in the preview. So a lot of custom views, they make assumptions that don't actually work in the view. So we have now this custom preview. So if you have any custom view and you want to see how it looks in the layout editor, now you will have the preview tab. You can click it and you will see how it looks. So hopefully you will see that custom view breaking, and you can actually debug it and see where the problem is. So hopefully this will help you to actually do things there. But not only that, if you're working a complicated custom view that does very complicated drawing, well, you can also have something like this, right? So you have an draw, and then you do your canvas drawing there. Before, what you will do is you will include in a layout that then you need to remove, or you have to navigate to that layout that actually has a custom view. Well, now we execute it. Yeah, the drawings will not like it, but you get what I mean. So hopefully we'll have you to test that the views actually work in the layout. And again, this is very much aligned with what we do now in Compose, where you have the code, and you have the preview, and you see how things work. Another new tool is the layout inspector. And again, similar with multi-preview, it's not really new. This was the previous layout inspector, or legacy layout inspector, I think that's going to be. The new one doesn't look that different. I mean, you see the properties panel. The properties panel looks slightly different, other than that. But we wrote this from scratch, so it's a completely new. And it has a bunch of very cool features that will help you dividing your layouts faster. So, yeah, so the first thing is like there is a checkbox at the top now that says live update. So if you have this connected to your device or terminator, before you will need to capture a layout and then you could inspect the hierarchy. Now this is live. So if you navigate through your application, the layout inspector will automatically refresh and it will change what you see. So that's one thing. The moment you want to stop, you uncheck the checkbox and then you can get that frozen so you can inspect. What is even cooler is the properties panel. So this looks very similar to the properties panel in the layout editor, and it has a lot of the same features, but it's there to help you defining why something looks the way that it looks. So now, if you have a text color in the new layout inspector, you can actually see why that text color is that value. So again, if you've been doing like web development and you use Chrome DevTools, that is not very impressive. But this is not something that you could do before in Android. So now you can actually debug and you can say that white color is coming from status material, that line, and it's actually overreading like the other one. So if you are wondering why it doesn't look like any of the other colors, now you see, you can actually click and navigate to it. So this is how it looks. So I plug it to the camera layout, I select what I want. So in this case, I select that view, I find the text color, which is somewhere. Text. I find text color, you see all the colors, I click it, and if I click, it opens the stuff. So basically what I mentioned. There is another feature which it looks very cool and hopefully will be very useful too, which is the 3D view. So you have a quite simple looking layout, but if you click the 3D view, you can see that actually it's not that simple. It's hiding a lot of stuff behind. So this will help you to debug when something is not visible. It might be visible in your view, but it might be hiding. Also, you can click any of the layers and actually you get the properties panel. So you can still debug colors or anything without having to basically navigate to something that you have hidden. Also, it will help you to debug if you have overdraw. So if you have many views that are painting one on top of each other, that is not good, and it will help you debug. So yeah, hopefully that will improve the. Okay, so now we do motion layout. Which is another of the new things. So we have now the motion editor, which is a tool that you can use to edit motion. So it's based on ConstraintLayout, so the library is the same, and actually it's a subclass of ConstraintLayout. What that means is if you want to use motion layout in your application, well, you get your ConstraintLayout, you change it to motion layout, don't. Well, unless you want to animate something, but we'll get into that. What motion layout does is allows you to define constraint sets, so you can have one to many constraint sets, and then you define transition. So a constraint set is just basically the constraints of a set of views. So in this case, we have the same views, but we have two different constraint sets that make it look very different. And then the transition says, I want to go from state A to state B. And that's basically all the motion layout does. It's actually way more complicated because you can do all sorts of trick animations, but that's the basic. So yeah, that's what I mentioned. So you go from start to end and a transition. And the transition can specify things like, well, I want this transition to last for 10 seconds or for 1 second or whatever. Or you can have multiple source constraint sets and multiple end and different transitions I want one from one to the other. Motion layout combines a lot of the previous animation frameworks. So hopefully you can use motion layout to do a lot of things that you worked in before with multiple separate things. So that includes property maker, the transition manager, or even coordinator layout. You can do a coordinator layout fairly simple, fairly simply with motion layout. Well, this is what you have to do. Make sure that you add the constraint layout dependency, not motion layout, constraint layout. The important thing is it has to be 2.0. That is where motion layout was added. And I do recommend that you use the latest beta version, right? So you say that in the beta folder. Okay, so on to the editor part of it. So the editor, basically, as you see here, is you still have the preview, and then we have a number of new panels. So the panel at the top will show all the constraint sets that you have. So the gray boxes are all the constraint sets, so the different views on how they are constrained, and then the arrows are just the transition, so how to go from one to the other. In the bottom part, if you click any of the constraint sets, this will display all the constraints, all the properties there, so you can see them. Lastly, if you click any transition, you will get this, which should be very familiar if you have done any animation in any popular animation tool, which is the timeline. So you see the keyframes or the key positions for certain objects, and then you can actually preview from here. So you can click play, you can set frame by frame, you can do slow motion, you can do anything. And you can do all this within the tool if you want to use it. So how do you create a motion layout? So as I said, you just create a constraint layout, you set the initial constraint, and then you start animating. So let's see how that is done. So I want to, here what I do is, okay, convert to motion layout. Yes, I want to do it, and then the motion editor will display. Then, okay, I'm going to do animation that Android goes from the top to the bottom. So what I do is I create a constraint and move it to the top, click the last constraint set, create another constraint, and move it to the bottom. And that's it. You just press play, you go to the transition, press play, done. And that is all it takes. It's literally that much. So this is what I did. It's very simple. What you saw is not really that complicated to do with the previous framework. Right? So you can still do that with property animators, and it wouldn't take that much effort. But the power of motion layout is the same way to do pretty much everything. So this is the code that the motion editor will generate for you. Very simple. So you have a motion layout on that side, and here you have the transition defined and the constraint set. Okay, now let's do something slightly more complicated, which is what if I want that animation to happen when I swipe, as opposed to just playing it. Again, not super complicated, but it starts to get more tricky if you want to do it with the traditional animation framework. Well, you just select the transition, and you say, okay, I want to add a swipe counter. And that's it. So, yeah, there is nothing else to do. Yeah, it's that simple. So, swipe counter, it's displayed, so you can basically say which view you want to swipe on and all that kind of thing, but it's all in the dialog, and that's it. So I'm going to now preview the editor. And now if I swipe on the surface, now the animation triggers based on that. So it will respect the acceleration and everything that you do, and that's it. There is nothing else to do. So again, motion layout hopefully will simplify a lot of the traditional animations, and will help you create better animation. And you can still preview here. So if you want to learn more about the library, this is the URL. From there, we have reference and some examples that you can actually follow. So yeah, just get started with it. Again, it's beta 4, but if you want to use it, if you want to use the editor, you will need to use 4.0. But other than that, you can already start playing with it. Okay, and the last section that I want to talk about is Jetpack Compose. I'm not sure if you have been following, but hopefully you have heard about what Jetpack Compose is. Let me remind you, this is a developer preview, which means do not use it in production. So let me repeat it, do not use it in production, unless you have a very big appetite for risk. So what is Jetpack Compose? So it's a declarative UI framework. It's all based in Kotlin. It will help, hopefully will mean that you have to write less code. And I think that basically what it will do for you is it will help with better state management. And what I mean by that is traditionally, like all the views get state. So if you set text in a text view, now the text is kept by the text view and also by the source. So if it's in your database or if it's anywhere else, when you do set text, now you have the same information duplicated. So we Compose, if you have used other frameworks or similar, you don't need to do that. You basically pass the parameter as text, and when that parameter changes, we will recompose the UI for you. This is a very super high-level architecture of how things are. So we have the tooling, your app will sit on top, and then we are basically giving you a UI library that includes everything that you need. So the layouts, the font rendering, like buttons, anything that you need. And then we have the Compose runtime library. So by combining those two, you can create your own components, or you can use Compose even like without the UI if you want. Like if you want something that is reactive to that. So I will say that. And then in terms of tooling, Compose is a Kotlin compiler plugin. So that's how it works. It's a plugin based on top of the Kotlin compiler that it will process the annotations and it will generate the code for you. We have the preview right now, so you can actually change code and see how it renders. And there are a few things that we have done into editing to make Compose more usable because, for example, composable methods tend to have a ton of parameters. So there are certain things that we have to do slightly different. Similar to ConstraintLayout, if you want to use it, you have to be using 4.0. I would recommend you use the newest canary, canary 6 in this case. And you have to include at least 6 dependencies. If you want to use the preview, you need the last one. If you want to use the preview, you can forget about the last dependency. That's it will work. Again, just one more reminder. This is a preview, and this is a preview for the library, as the Dev03 should basically tell you. And it's also a preview in terms of tooling. We think that it's stable, but yeah, we are still working with it. It's just being developed in the open. We want your feedback, so try it out. But yeah, try not to use it in production. If you want to get a project, we provide in 4.0. We have a template. This is a very quick way to get you started. So you click the empty compose activity, next. Done, you have a new project. And as I said, in terms of tooling, we have different editing experience. We have the live preview. And hopefully with the live preview and hot reload, what we want to do is to have a faster development cycle. So we want you to get to do your UIs in a faster way, to test them, and to actually get to it faster. Now, how do I preview a composer? This is a simple composable. And yeah, this will be what I would put in my activity, in my hello world activity. So it's just a text and like hello world. If I want to preview it, well, you just basically annotate it with a preview and you are done. You will get a notification in Studio that says, hey, seems that you want to preview this, do you want to do it? Yes, and you will open the preview. So this is how it looks. It's quite hard to see in Dracula, but I'll fix that in a second. But yeah, it's similar to what I was telling you before. Now you have the split mode, you have the code, and next to it, you have the preview. Okay, I want to make it more visible. So this is real time, so I didn't change anything. So this is how it works actually. So you basically change the color to white. I wanted to make it visible, and then you press fill and refresh, and you wait, and that's it. So that is basically the type of experience that you will have right now. You can do, again, because it's code, I'm not going to get into the details of Compose, but you can do pretty much anything that you can do with code. So in this case, if I want to repeat the same text view 10 times, I don't need to have 10 text views. I basically can do repeat 10, and yeah, I want to repeat the surface 10 times. Go. Again, fill and press. So that's a taste of how Compose works. If you want to see the whole system UI, the word is still there, so you want to see how it looks in your activity, you can still go same as the layout editor, show me the system UI, or hide it. By default, it won't display the system UI because in Compose you might be developing one component, but if you want to see how it looks in activity, you can still do it. So a few things for the preview. Currently, it's only applicable to composables that actually don't have parameters. So that shouldn't be a problem. If you have any composable that has parameters, you can do a preview in a different composable that actually calls the first one. And hopefully, this is a good way also to inject data that you want to test. So if you have a composable or an activity that actually receives a list of names, well, this is a good way to do it. You define a preview, and then you create a list of names, and you pass it to the composable. And the preview will actually do that. And again, it's just code, so you can do anything that you could do in code. You can customize dimensions. So if you want to see how your component reacts, you can do width and height, put it in the annotation, in the pre-annotation, and basically you will see how it reacts. You can also set a name if you want. So this is how it works basically. So you put that width, and you can see how your component reacts. So the text width that I had before, well, if I put it a little bit like narrower, this is how it looks. If I make it a lot more, like, well, that's how it works. And that's what a device will do. So again, it helps you test how your component reacts. The other thing that you can do is, because we expect you to have a number of previews in your file, you can group them. So you can set groups to different things. So this is how it works. So if you have groups, basically with the name, then they will display at the top. So you can filter by that. So this is one example where we have previews for dark and light themes, and that's how it works. The preview will display. If you change anything in your code, it will automatically reflect there once you press the end of the press. So if you want to learn more, you can actually, like, again, there is a ton of information about Compose. There is a tutorial that will guide you through the first steps on how to get you started. So a lot of things that I mentioned and a lot more. So you can go to the URL and get started. And yeah, this is the last thing that I want to mention. As I said before with the bugs are important, but feedback in general is super important. And Compose is being developed in the open just because of this. So we want your feedback. Please keep sending it. We listen to the feedback, so if you go to Slack or if you go to Reddit, you will see that a lot of us are actually active there and we will reply to your questions, or we will try our best. But again, very important, please fill issues for the design tools, for Compose, for anything that you see. And with that, that's everything that I have. I'm going to be around today, so if you have any questions, you can run me if you want. If you have any questions now,
would it be possible to combine the motion layout with Compose in the future?
What's that?
The motion layout, like the organization, you combine with Compose in the future?
Yeah, I can't comment a lot about future plans, but yes, obviously Compose will support animations, so there will be something. That's as much as I can say.
Is there any date for a release for the Compose library? Like
No.
1 year?
No. There is no date. Anything, not about dates or like future plans? Well, I guess that's it then. Thank you very much.